What's going on, guys? So we are going to sit tight and get ready because the Canon EOS R5 has just been announced, and I've actually known about this camera for about a week, had a chance to go over all the specs, the images, all the information, talk to Canon about it. There is a ton here that I want to go over, stuff that you wouldn't see in a normal spec sheet and you probably didn't know, and all the questions we've had for the past couple of weeks, even if you've seen all of the leaks and all the other stuff. But this is the most excited I have been about a camera in a long time. I think the last two cameras that actually got me excited were the Sony a7 III, which kind of revolutionized that $2,000 full frame price point, and the Panasonic GH5, which did things that no other camera were doing. I'm probably more excited about this camera because it costs twice the price, but it is doing things that we just thought were going to be impossible for potentially years to come in a lot of areas in this camera. So we're gonna go over this camera. Please subscribe. I got the camera coming in any day now, so it's gonna be awesome. We got a bunch of shoots planned for this, so stay tuned. But let's talk about Canon's new EOS R5. All right, so first, this is a 45 megapixel sensor, and I kind of knew that from before because we knew it was 8K and I could interpolate the difference that it would need to be on resolution, but this is a completely new design sensor with better dynamic range. It has a faster readout, so you should be seeing less rolling shutter from it, better low light performance than other similar resolution cameras. So this is a brand new sensor from Canon, and this is good because some of their other sensors kind of needed a little bit of redesign to be able to compete with some of the better ones out there. Also, it does have a low pass filter on it, which is kind of interesting for a higher resolution camera. The good is that you won't get moiré or anything like that. That can happen from shirts like this. That's very good for portrait photographers or anything like that. It can have a little hit on detail, so hopefully Canon has kind of redesigned it a little bit to make it even better. We also have Canon's new CR3 14-bit RAW files here, so the quality on this should be amazing. Also, we have the new HEIF format that Canon used with the 1DX Mark III for an alternative to a JPEG, so you can get 10-bit out of those files for basically the same file size as a JPEG. Now, I also have to mention that if you don't want to shoot 45 megapixels, you can absolutely shoot either a 23 megapixel RAW or a 12 megapixel RAW. This is something I've kind of dissed Sony on in the past for not giving us those smaller RAW file options. Not every time do I want 100 megabyte RAW files, and so this is a good option for you guys if you're looking for something like that. Also, 12 frames per second mechanical with a 20 frame per second electronic shutter. Remember, this is a 45 megapixel camera, not like a 24 megapixel. So a lot of other cameras can shoot like in that 10 to 12 frames per second mark mechanical, but they are not shooting 45 megapixels. So this is unbelievable. I mean, the 1DX Mark III can shoot 20 frames per second electronic, but that's 20 megapixels. So whatever Canon is doing on this one is absolutely amazing. So we'll show you a graphic of all of the buffer requirements on this because they're kind of all over the place depending on how you shoot. But a few takeaways right here. So this is a dual card camera. So you have one CFexpress, one UHS-2 SD card. The good side of that is it shows how amazing CFexpress is. The downside is if you're someone who shoots dual RAW, so RAW to both cards, you will be limited by the slower card, obviously. Not really a problem with the camera at all, but it'll kind of show you the benefits to having that CFexpress card. However, I do think that being able to shoot 87 frames with a 47 megapixel or 45 megapixel camera is absolutely amazing. I mean, you're talking about holding that shutter down for like 7 seconds at 12 frames per second. That is way better than what you would get with like a Sony a7 III or R4. We'll do some more buffer tests when we get it in there, but results are looking promising. And if you do shoot with the CFexpress card only, the actual buffer limit is crazy because that card can just clear so fast. Now, if you are one that wants to shoot electronic shutter, either because you want those faster speeds of 20 frames per second or because you want to be able to shoot silently, do keep in mind that usually that means that we're going to see rolling shutter and or banding in our images. Canon has stated that this sensor does allow a much faster readout, so hopefully that means that rolling shutter is not going to be as much of an issue. And they they do state that banding could be an issue in artificial lights. That's pretty much on every camera except maybe the Sony A9. So hopefully there have been some improvements here to make electronic shutter a lot more usable than it has been in the past on other cameras. Now, autofocus is also getting some major improvements here, and I kind of expected this because the 1DX Mark III saw a ton of changes in live view autofocus. The Canon EOS R has always been good, but it was never kind of record setting. And with the 1DX Mark III, Canon took things up to a next level. However, in this camera, they are also building on the 1DX Mark III in live view and making it even better. So you now have their dual pixel 2 system with 1,053 autofocus points around the entire frame, 100% frame coverage, vertical and horizontal for this. So if you're someone who's coming from DSLR world, you are not limited at all. Wherever you want to put that AF point, wherever you want to put that subject, the camera can focus on it from the beginning the subject enters the frame all the way to the end. That is absolutely unbelievable. You do have face and eye tracking throughout, so people or animals, birds, anything like that will be able to keep up with this autofocus system. Keep in mind that Canon's AF also works at the maximum aperture of the lens. So if you throw like this 50mm 1.2 on this camera, you can actually focus down to low light at -6 EV. This is like pure darkness right here. So absolutely incredible. Not a lot of cameras can do that, and Canon is pulling off in this. So this is shaping up to be one of the best, if not the best autofocus system, and certainly the best in low light. So now we get to talk video, and this is probably one of the most exciting things about this camera because nobody else is even coming close to what this camera can do right here. So yes, 8K, RAW, DCI, or UHD, up to 30 frames per second. You can shoot RAW or not RAW. It's up to you on that one. Also, same thing with log. Now, the RAW is going to be the same kind of RAW that's on the 1DX Mark III, so something we're already familiar with. You also have zebras and focus assist now that not all of Canon cameras had. You do have 24 frames per second, and all the other frame rates. I'll show a graphic with some frame rates too, because people were worried that yes, you could shoot 8K at all of these things, but could you also shoot the lower frame rates? And everything is there. Canon is giving you every option. We'll go over those some more. 4K is up to 120 frames per second in full sensor width or crop mode, DCI or UHD. This is absolutely crazy. If you're using the 120 frames per second or 60 frames per second, it is not oversampled from the entire sensor. However, if you're using 30 frames per second or below, this is actually oversampled. So if you're talking about an unbelievable quality here, I'm guessing that the 4K 30 is going to be the best and most detailed 4K 30 you have seen in any camera, because it is absolutely being upscaled from this 45 megapixel camera. We also have 10-bit 422 with Canon log or HDRPQ internal recording. Internal recording, guys. All of this is internal. And all of the formats with autofocus, it's all there. You can shoot anything. There are so many different options on this camera. Both Canon log and HDRPQ are just an option for the camera. So you can shoot normal movie, same thing with raw recording. So you do have kind of both of these options. So if you don't want to go crazy with this camera, you don't have to. All optional on this. Also, a big plus is being able to shoot in the crop mode or full frame in virtually every format from 4K down. Also, I kind of dissed the 1DX Mark III in how it handled switching all of these different frame rates. Some of you guys even got mad at me for doing that. However, Canon has actually improved the functionality of it for this camera. They needed to, because now we have like 100 options of how to adjust our frame rates and everything like that in these cameras. They needed an interface to support it. We now have it, so this is all over the board a much better camera. So we could literally spend all day long going over these bitrate and frame rate options here. So I'll spare you and throw up the graphic instead. However, I do want to say that yes, you can absolutely shoot 8K RAW, UHD DCI at 2600 megabits per second, but you can also shoot all of the other frame rates and bitrate options that might be more towards some of us who are just more casually shooting, lower end bitrate options down to 120 megabits per second. So stuff that doesn't have massive file size that'll be chewing through cards like crazy. So I am so happy that Canon has really included the full gamut of different options on here. So I think no matter who you are, you should be able to find something you're happy with. So there is a negative here though, and that is that Canon is still doing a 30-minute record limit for video. And this is a big deal. I mean, for YouTube videos, I don't care, but for weddings especially, I'm always having to go to my cameras, stop recording, start recording again. This is a huge limitation, not being able to record more than 30 minutes straight. And it's in basically every different format on this one. This needs to be unlocked when the camera ships, or at least provide a firmware option to allow us to spend 100, 200 bucks, whatever, and upgrade this to unlock the video limit. On a camera like this, it is really a shame to be able to do that. We've seen Panasonic do like firmware upgrades for video that cost 100, 200 bucks, whatever. I would accept that as a result, but I do think this is something that definitely needs to go away on a camera as powerful as this. Also, we were worried about overheating, and it is potentially here. So in 8K, you could see an overheating warning limit at around the 20-minute mark, and at 4K 60 right around that 25-minute mark. I will say I'm not really blaming Canon for this. They basically put this in a standard EOS R style body or 5D Mark IV body. And that means you can get overheating on this. It's not in the regular frame rates. It's only when shooting the different formats that no other camera can even offer. Panasonic's S1H put in a whole like heatsink and fan unit in it to be able to control that. So Canon is not doing anything wrong with this one. It's just basically the reality of shooting these crazy frame rates. I'm still glad they gave us the option of doing it, and we can deal with the overheating if we need to, but do keep in mind it is potentially there. So unless someone else can pull off unlimited 4K 60 or 8K recording, Canon is still the camera to beat right there, and I am absolutely okay with that. And one little question I did get asked a lot is if you could record to CFexpress or SD. You can actually record all of these formats onto SD with the exception of higher bitrate 8K options, which will require the CFexpress card. So if you have an SD card, you can record all 4K options as long as it's V60 or higher. V90 I think is required for one of the formats, or the CFexpress card will be required to shoot full 8K at any of the higher bitrate options. So let's kind of talk about some of the normal features that are coming in this camera, because even those have gotten some crazy steps up that I did not expect at all. So first off is the image stabilization. So you do now have in-body image stabilization. We knew this was coming. However, Canon is quoting 7 to 8 stops of IBIS with a lot of their lenses on there, and pretty much all of them have at least 7 stops of IBIS, and some even have 8 stops of performance. This is crazy. This is better than we are seeing with pretty much any camera out there. And if this is true, and Canon has showed images with 2-second handheld shots at 85 millimeters, and they look tack sharp, this is revolutionizing the IBIS system on there, and I am crazy excited to be able to shoot this and see how it kind of holds up in video as well. The EVF is also 5.7 million dots, which is pretty much the best that we have around here, and that is also a refresh rate of 120 frames per second, which is the fastest I have seen, I think, which means that this camera is going to be one of the best if you're using electronic viewfinder. So especially if you're coming from a DSLR, this is going to be the camera that gives you the most realistic experience when using an electronic viewfinder. The flip screen is also 3.2 inches, which is a little bit larger than some of the other cameras out there. 2.1 million dots, which is extremely high resolution. You also have dual band Wi-Fi on here, 2.4 gigahertz or 5 gigahertz if you need something faster, plus Bluetooth. That's pretty crazy in this camera right here. But even more impressive is Canon also has a battery grip option with better Wi-Fi LAN controls in here. So an entire wireless file transmission system with FTP and all that kind of stuff inside this battery grip. So this is really a professional wireless or wired tethering camera if you do need it. Also top of the line ports all around here. So USB-C 3.1 generation 2, micro HDMI. I kind of wish that was a mini HDMI. Also, you do have a mic input and a headphone output, which we would expect on a camera like this. Now, durability is ranked higher than an EOS R, really more in line with a 5D Mark IV, which is this is kind of the mirrorless version of that camera right there. Also, it did grow by about 75 grams compared to the EOS R, but still lighter than a 5D Mark IV. So it's really impressive kind of what Canon has thrown into this camera and still making it lighter than those old cameras right there. This actually kind of looks like a cross between a 5D4 and an EOS R, really kind of pulling my favorite parts of each camera. So we now have the joystick, and the back layout is a little bit more similar to a 5D Mark IV, but the top of the layout and the top of the camera is more like these EOS R cameras, plus we have the flip screen and things like that. So basically the best parts of each camera have been combined into this one right here. Also, there's a new battery grip for this camera, and the battery grip will actually work with the EOS R6, which we have a separate video on. My wife Sally gives you all the details on that one, so go check that out, because this camera, the R6, is actually going to be a great camera in and of itself, or pretty much the perfect second body if you're an EOS R5 owner, so go ahead and check that out as well. So the real question is there any reason that you shouldn't be excited about this camera? Because with the quality, the IBIS performance on this, just so many features that Canon has thrown in this, from autofocus and the video, that nobody even comes close to touching these video features, this is the camera to beat for 2020, hands down. So the bigger question is, at $38.99, does it justify that price? And I do think that Canon has thrown enough in here to really separate itself from the pack, because you can get like an A7R4 for much cheaper than that now. However, if you want the best, and if you've been on the fence waiting for Canon's next level camera, this is going to be it. And if you don't have 4K ready, go ahead and check out the Canon EOS R6, because that is giving you most of this camera in a much cheaper $1,300 less camera. So we've got a full video on that Sally did as well. Again, I've got this camera coming in, so stay tuned. So many shoots with it coming in. Ask me your questions. Tell me your thoughts on this camera. We'll get it all for you when it comes in. And thank you so much for watching, guys. Stay tuned. Really cool stuff on the way.